We had a bumper crop of apples this year. Greetings, friends. This is Survival Doc of the newsurvivalist.com website. Today, I'm going to talk to you about two topics. One is fruit trees. I recommend that if you have the space, that you plant some fruit trees of your own. And if you plant fruit trees, I recommend that you plant the dwarf or the semi-dwarf varieties. The dwarf and the semi-dwarf varieties do not grow as tall, although they do produce as much fruit as a full-size tree. But because they don't grow so tall, it is a lot easier to harvest your fruit. Plus, they take up less space. Now, why do you want to grow fruit trees? Unlike your garden, which requires have to be replanted every year, fruit trees only have to be planted once, or perhaps once every 10 or 20 years. They're easier than your garden, and they produce a lot of food per space. Fruit trees do require some maintenance. They have to be pruned every year. So be sure to get a good book on pruning and learn how to prune your fruit trees right, because if they're not pruned right, they will not produce as much fruit. Also, sometimes you have to spray your fruit trees, and so there is a learning curve, as with gardening. So I don't recommend that you wait until the emergency hits and then run out and plant your fruit trees. You need to plant your fruit trees now. First of all, it'll take them a year or two before they even start producing fruit, and it will also give you some time to learn how to manage your fruit trees. Now, once you get your fruit, then you'll want to be able to store your fruit until you can eat it, because when you have a fruit tree, you get a lot of fruit at one time, far more than you can eat at any one time. And of course, what you want to do is preserve some of your food so that you'll have the fruit to eat throughout the year. Now, you can can fruit, of course. You can freeze it. What I like to do is I like to dehydrate the fruit. When you dehydrate the fruit, you do not have to keep it cold like you do with frozen food. I believe dehydration is easier than canning. Plus, dehydrated foods are very compact and very light, and they're easy to store. You can put them in your bug-out bag, and you can carry a lot in your bug-out bag because they produce very little weight, unlike canned goods and some other foods. Now, what is the storage life of dried foods? If they're dried well, the storage life is almost indefinitely. However, I caution you, there is some fairly rapid deterioration in the quality of the food. But even though the deterioration occurs, the food is still edible. It won't poison you. But I recommend that you eat your fruit within about a year or two after drying it. And the same if you dry other foods. You can dry vegetables as well, and even dry meat, make jerky. What I do is, the first year I produced fruit, I dried a lot of fruit and I put it in storage, and I kept it there until the next season. That way I had a year's supply of dried fruit in storage, and it will keep a year without losing any quality. You can take the fruit out a year later and eat it, and it's just as good as when it was first put away. After about the second year, though, there will be some deterioration, and there'll be less flavor, less vitamins, and there will be some noticeable deterioration in the food. So I recommend you eat it in a year. So what I do is, when my next fruit harvest comes and I start putting away the fruit of this year's harvest, at that time I will pull out the fruit from last year and we'll rotate that into our pantry and start eating that. Alright, that way you always have a full year supply of dried food. Here is last year's, some of last year's dried fruit. These are pears. I dried these. Sometimes I peeled them. I dried these with the peel on them. They're good to eat, just like this. Dried fruit, because when you dry fruit, it concentrates the sugar, so it's slightly sweeter. Dried fruit is delicious to eat, just like this. Lightweight, you can put this in your bug out bag. Carry a lot of good, high energy food with very little weight. Now, once you dry the food, all you have to do is just put it in airtight containers such as this plastic bag and store it away till the next year. Now, to be stored for a year, fruit has to be dried properly, so you need to make sure that it is good and dry, but you don't want to over dry it. And the way that you tell is if it's dried properly, it will bend slightly. It will bend, but it will also crack. Now, it won't snap like a potato chip. If it snaps like a potato chip, then it's too dry. So what it should do is it should bend, but when it bends, it should also break, although not snap, but it should break. This piece right here is dried perfectly. I'll show you up closer. When you bend it, see how it breaks there? See how it breaks here, but it doesn't snap. Alright, this is when it's dried perfectly. Now when you're drying your food, and when you take it out of the dehydrator to test it, if it's warm, it will be softer than usual. So you have to allow your test piece to cool down to room temperature before you bend it for the test. Now if you don't dry your fruit enough, it can grow mold on it, which will ruin it. If it's dried too much, it will just be too crispy and hard, not as fun to eat, not as delicious, but it will still be edible. So if you have to err on the side of too dry. But there really isn't any reason to err. I've been drying fruit for many years, and I've never had any go moldy. This is Survival Doc, reminding you, be prepared, or be prepared to be fleeced.